Ladies and gentlemen, this is CVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. In this episode, we're diving deep into the murky waters of Russian politics, where the only thing thicker than tension is, well, the irony. Now, if you're startled by last week's headlines, you're not alone. Russia's Deputy Defense Minister, Timur Ivanov, found himself behind bars over bribery charges. A figure once untouchable, adorned in medals and ribbons, now just another guest of the state. It's been a while since we saw a big fish get fried in Russia, especially since the war in Ukraine began. Ivanov, known for his high society ties and being a regular at Moscow's glitziest events, is suddenly in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
This is the first time since the 1990s that a Russian army general was detained in uniform. Timur Ivanov had his office breached by police only a few hours after a defense ministry meeting. Ivanov was charged with corruption, which resulted in the arrests of his accomplices as well. Construction companies headed by Ivanov's partners in crime were commissioned to build infrastructure for the defense ministry, earning them massive payouts. In return, those same companies will build villas and properties for the deputy defense minister. However, Western analysts aren't concerned about a Russian official being corrupt. What really interests them are the actual reasons behind him being charged. These experts say that the real cause behind his arrest was the undermining of the growing influence of Sergei Shoigu, the sitting Russian defense minister and close ally of Ivanov. Since the failed mutiny of late Wagner PMC head Yevgeny Prigozhin, Shoigu's voice in the Kremlin has been steadily rising. At the time of Prigozhin's march on Moscow, Vladimir Putin could not acknowledge Shoigu's shortcomings in the invasion of Ukraine, as that would give merit to the rebellion. However, now, right before forming a new government, Putin could be also trying to get rid of his defense minister without it being seen as motivated by Prigozhin's mutiny. This coincides with rumors of a possible government reshuffle in the Kremlin sometime soon.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Now, when I say this was surprising, I really mean it. Ivanov was arrested right after a defense ministry meeting, in full uniform no less. It's like getting dumped on your anniversary while still at the dinner table. But here's a twist. This charge seems too trivial for such a public takedown. The word on the streets of Moscow? High treason could be on the menu. While officials deny these spicy rumors, the plot thickens. Interestingly, no weapons mishaps were on Ivanov's resume. It was all about the money, managing the cash flows of prestigious construction projects like Patriot Park, the Disneyland for military enthusiasts. And where there's managing funds in the Kremlin, embezzlement falls one step behind. So now let's talk about his direct superior, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. His reaction? Swift dismissal and absolute silence. Rumor has it that he's got his own skeletons, previously exposed by none other than opposition figure Alexei Navalny. It seems even the big dogs in Putin's yard aren't safe from each other. The Federal Security Service's strike on Ivanov could also be a clever misdirection. Why? Well, they could be needing a new headline after there's been a recent terrorist attack in Krakow City Hall, with the FSBs fumbling around, unable to pin down a convincing scapegoat. Meanwhile, the specter of radicalism is rising, with the links stretching from Tajikistan to Russia's bustling metropolises. And as if Moscow didn't have enough on its plate, let's throw some regional instability into the mix. Over in the North Caucasus, tensions are brewing, with recent attacks adding fuel to a fiery standoff between Dagestan and Chechnya. Putin, in his grand wisdom, is keeping his cabinet as is, even after Ivanov's arrest. Why? Well, because shuffling the deck might just remind everyone of how old the cards really are. He's surrounded by a gallery of geriatrics who, like fine wine, have turned a bit sour with age. The young bloods? Well, they're stuck in a bureaucratic limbo, probably losing more hair than hope as they wait for their shot at the big leagues. In essence, Putin has crafted an autocracy that's both deeply corrupt and bizarrely stable. It's an aging regime that's less about legacy and more about clinging to power, as if it's the last lifeboat on the Titanic. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Agnieszka Legutska, Russia analyst at the Polish Institute for International Affairs. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So we are looking at this headline that shocked a lot of people, of course, talking about one of the most high-ranking Russian officials, the deputy defense minister, being arrested. Can you help us break down what exactly happened and what we can infer from that?
I mean, we are observing some difficult situation from my perspective, Minister Shoigu, the Minister of Defense of Russia, because around him there are several people, officials who just recently been arrested for corruption, and as we know, in Russia, corruption is have the systemic meaning, is a fundament for the system of Putin, because not only Putin, historically corruption was always present, but definitely when someone is accused for the corruption, it means that definitely something behind it, because everyone who is around Putin and even around the authorities, they are in the system of corruption, the hierarchy of corruption. So either he did not share that his like part of the money that he received, but definitely it's much more broader perspective, because as I said, there are other maybe not so important vice minister Ivanov, but at the same time we are observing some kind of pressure from FSB, because the FSB decided to raise those accusation towards vice ministers. So there were always struggle between two different type of let's say branches. Like one is army and one is FSB, and they are trying to reshape the Russian security system at the same time to receive more corruptive schemes for themselves. But as I see it, it's much more broader, more broader problem for the Minister Shoigu as such, because he is the head of Minister of Defense. He is the leader who is responsible for the so-called special military operation in Ukraine. So that's why I think that the corruption is not the issue. There need to be something behind it.
Right, I think you brought up a very good point here, because us in the Western world and normal democracy, when we hear corruption, we would think, okay, maybe the person have done something wrong. But in a Russian context, where corruption is kind of the middle name of how they operate there, it's usually a means to arrest someone or throw someone behind bars that they don't really like. So it's more likely a power struggle internally than actual corruption charges. So this kind of led us to contemplate on the situation in this war in Ukraine. Do you think that there's any internal rift that's going on inside Russia that is causing this huge earthquake?
I mean, from our perspective, when we look at Ukraine right now, the position of Ukraine is weakening towards Russia, right? So they are still trying to hold the line, but at the same time, Russians are having much more people, much more weapons, and they are hitting Ukraine much harder than it was last year. So, for example, the help, military help from US will be so crucial to hold the line for a longer time. But at the same time, when you look at from the Russian perspective, still those strategic goals like capturing Ukraine's sovereignty and making the authorities in Kiev more pro-Russian, those strategic goals has not been accomplished. So there are also in a society, there are some moods that okay, that operation could go faster, could better, especially that they are all the time highlighting that the Russia army is so great, so a performance towards the whole West, right? Because they are capturing the propaganda that actually Russia is not fighting in Ukraine with Ukrainians, but rather with the whole collective West. So that means that follows that behind the door there are in between rivals between different branches of around Kremlin, and as I said before, the systemic corruption always a problem for the whole society. But at the same time, my colleague once said that if there will not be corruption, then how he can manage to do something basic. So it's like all levels of the authorities in Russia, they are very corrupted, but also kind of it's a political thing, and to which on which Putin is based his loyalty of his own comrades. So, for example, in the West, we usually say that if you have money, then you have influence to power. But in Russia, it's the opposite. How close you are, the closest and much more loyal you are to Putin, then additionally you will receive a lot of money. But there is a risk, right? There is a risk to being arrested, to being convicted by this. But it's, as I said before, it's really not an issue.
All right, this is a very interesting kind of phenomenon that you're describing to us here, and it is very hard to imagine from a Western perspective of, being on the edge at the same time, trying to get these benefits and not getting arrested. So this brings us to another question of whether or not this is just a prelude to perhaps things to come. For example, maybe something that might happen to Shoigu.
I think so. It's also the different situation in the West and in Russia. Because in the West, when you are not doing your job well, then you get fired, right? But in Russia, as you can observe, the generic elite around Putin, he would sometimes fire anyone from the system in this very narrow circle around Putin, for example, I don't know, Lavrov or Peskov or even Shoigu, that would bring everyone to the conclusion that Putin, he is also responsible for the failure. So that's why if you are even doing something bad when you are on some particular post, then definitely you will not be fired, because that would mean that your boss who appointed you to this position definitely is also responsible for your faults. So that's why that kind of arrestation of different people around Shoigu, it's a way of pushing Shoigu for do something or be more active in the battlefield, rather than the idea that Shoigu can be somehow removed from the office.
All right, and is what you're describing why we see the Russian political system, especially the higher echelon, look like a geriatric hospital, and when these people have a very hard time being replaced?
Yeah, that's it. And we were also writing a report about Kremlin kids. So, kids who are actually now 40s, 30s, like Elisa Pieskova, or even like daughter of Shoigu, they are in the second round of circle, the second elite. And this is very important because this geriatric elite, as we are describing, they used to have a lot of, banks accounts in the West. And they also were treating their children, like the successor of the throne, as someone from in the perspective that they will secure their future. And they are actually after the war, the invasion, they started to coming in to Russia, and they are patronizing the system because they really like when these corrupting schemes are actually beneficial for them. So Minister of Agriculture Patrushev is the son of very close, very old Nikolai Patrushev, who is the leader of Security Council, the advisory body for Putin. So they are trying to replace new people, not with new blood in the system, but rather to have this scheme giving to their children.
All right, so we are looking at a political system that is more about loyalty than competency, and nepotism rather than what they really can carry out. So do you think that this can be sustainable in any way, shape, or form in the long run?
I think so. Yeah, that the system, unfortunately for us, and especially for Ukraine, is benefiting from the war. Because these new schemes of bringing loyalty by money, it's exactly what you are showing on those movies and pictures, that the new money you can earn on those occupation territories in Mariupol. That's why Ivanov was exactly appointed as a corruptive person, because he was responsible for rebuilding Mariupol, which is this big city destroyed by Russians at the beginning of this full invasion. So new corruptive mechanisms are actually a very important place, an element of the occupation of Ukraine. And that is also the same story, that behind the government contract, you are taking half of it, because there was research that which shows that actually half of those money that is on the paper, actually half of it is going directly to the corruptive system.
Right. Last but not least, that brings me to the question whether or not you see this political system being the actual reason why they're so aggressive in their expansionist kind of ways.
Yeah, exactly. And this is continuation of what I said, that war is something to bring loyalty to the system. Because, for example, the death of Prigozhin last year, as it was also a mechanism for the elite, for the very narrow circle of Putin. So either you earn money, either you can be arrested, or either you can die. If your leader reduce or is end of loyalty, or do not feel this loyalty for him.
Right. Thank you so much again for helping us shed light on the Russian mentality and the political system. It really gives us a lot of perspective. So appreciate it. Thanks again for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thanks.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. The government in Tbilisi is hell-bent on passing the so-called foreign agent bill. Opponents of the proposed legislation said that signing it into law might plunge Georgia into authoritarianism.
Under the proposed measures, organizations that receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad would have to register as foreign agents. This has sparked significant controversy in the country. Critics of the bill have compared it to similar measures taken in Russia. Western commentators also said this move might compromise Tbilisi's efforts to join the European Union. The Georgian capital saw a wave of protests following the parliament's decision to push the legislation through. Riot police tried to disperse the angry crowd using tear gas and water cannons. Over 60 protesters were arrested by police, with several others reported to have suffered injuries at the hands of the authorities. Analysts say the bill will likely be vetoed by the Georgian president.
Estonia's foreign minister recently said that Russia is violating international regulations by interfering with GPS signals outside of its own airspace. According to the Estonian official, the matter will also be taken up with other NATO and EU countries.
This news comes as Finnair, the flag carrier and largest legacy airline of Finland, announced a temporary suspension of its flights to Tartu, a city in eastern Estonia next to the Russian border. The pause, caused by ongoing GPS disturbances, is scheduled to last for 1 month. The airline also reported encountering similar issues near Finland's eastern border with Russia, as well as around the Kaliningrad exclave. The Estonian foreign minister said the matter will be discussed with Estonia's EU and NATO partners, as Russian interference with GPS signals is a breach of international airspace regulations.
Russia continues to launch missiles at Ukrainian cities as Kyiv scrambles for more air defense systems. It seems that no target are off limits to Moscow's forces, as law school in Odessa has become the latest entry in Russia's long list of destroyed infrastructure.
The Gothic-style building that housed the private university was located in a popular seafront park. Russian missiles have often made contact with Odessa sport infrastructure, dealing collateral damage to the school. At least 5 people were killed and several others were wounded in the strike. Just hours before the strike took place, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called on the wider West to speed up its deliveries of air defense equipment and weaponry. Kyiv is expected to receive a massive influx of weapons and ammunition following the signing of the latest aid package to Ukraine by US President Joe Biden. This will allow Ukrainian forces to protect the country's many cultural sites from sharing the same fate as the law school in Odessa.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is planning to take a 5-day trip to European countries that could potentially work with Beijing in the future. His main goal is to show top European officials that China offers more significant economic opportunities than the US is ready to acknowledge.
The countries that will host the Chinese president are France, Serbia and Hungary. French President Emmanuel Macron is reportedly seeking to entice Chinese spending into France's electric vehicle battery sector, among other investments. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said Xi's visit to Europe, the first one of its kind in 5 years, will kickstart peaceful development in the region and the world. Wang Yi, Beijing's foreign minister, also said he hopes Macron can push the EU to pursue a pragmatic policy toward China. Apart from discussing new investments, Xi Jinping is also expected to talk about the ongoing wars in Ukraine and the Middle East with top European officials. This includes meeting the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, for a trilateral meeting that will likely be hosted by Emmanuel Macron in Paris.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.